All right, well, welcome to the Advent season, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Oftentimes the Christmas season in the church world is a bit of a tiring one for pastors. Christmas and Easter is kind of where we get our butts kicked because they're the big events of the church calendar. But I felt more spiritually energized by being in this study this year than maybe in years past. I'm not sure why. Don't have an explanation for it, but I have felt kind of lifted up in this. And so I'm trusting that as we move through this series, this Advent focus for the next 4 weeks, that maybe that will be true for you as well by God's grace. Our Advent series is titled Christmas Knockoffs. By knockoffs, I mean, of course, imitations, fakes, forgeries, counterfeits. Something trying to be something else. The Christmas season really is a season of knockoffs. From our feelings to our entertainment choices, to merchandise, to even truth. So much of what goes on in the Christmas season is classified, I think, fairly as maybe close but not quite. The year was 1994. I was 11 years old. We were in Calgary at my grandparents' for Christmas. I had a tremendous mushroom cut. I was growing a mustache, but not on purpose. My jeans were way too big, and I was asked by my mother to wear a red and green flannel shirt. It matched my brother's, and my mother insisted that on this day, if only for this day, would I please keep it tucked in. I wanted to look nice for Christmas, she told me. I was thankful in that moment for my cool black braided belt from the Gap. Some of you may have had those yourself. That at least eased the burden of the tucked-in shirt and the foolishness I felt I was now presenting to all of our friends and family. I was arguably at 11 years old and in 1994 in my Christmas prime. Old enough to play it cool, but young enough to still sort of explode with excitement of what could come this day. That Christmas, I was hoping to find under the tree, as were many other boys and girls my age, the Offspring's album, Smash, and also possibly Green Day's album, Dookie. But my grandparents, who I love dearly, bought me a Newsboys CD instead. Nothing screams knockoff, imitation, or forgery to an 11-year-old boy on a fairly long identity quest like a alternative Christian rock album that's cool in church. My grandparents, of course, had good intentions, and I think that they believed that if I listened to the Newsboys enough, it would keep Jesus in my heart all year round, and of course, the Offspring and Green Day out. As a side note, though, has that common strategy ever worked? Like, people are still trying this, and so maybe it's important we just acknowledge, I don't think this works. Like, has anyone ever got the contemporary Christian album instead of the album they really wanted and thought, wow, my grandparents were right, this stuff is way better. Stryper is way better than Metallica. DC Talk is way better than the Beastie Boys. The Newsboys are way better than the Offspring. I'm glad I got this instead. Maybe it's just me. Now, I have nothing against the Newsboys, but showing my friends my new Christian rock/worship CD wasn't going to earn too many grade 6 cool points on the playground in the new year. So it was tough. Now, I admit that this story isn't maybe a perfect example of a knockoff, and some knockoffs are maybe more obvious. So to really drive this point home, I took some time this week to research some bad Christmas toy in general knockoffs. I think that we've all been kids or even parents desiring to give that hottest of Christmas toys to our kids, or if we are kids, to receive that. And sometimes those are hard to get. And so some of us have experienced that painful moment when you open up the thing that is not quite the thing. It was almost the thing you wanted, but not quite. So here's a few examples of that. Maybe one Christmas you really wanted a Godzilla.
But instead you unwrap Japan's second most famous monster lizard, the big fella. Maybe you anticipated hours of fun on a Game Boy. But instead you were given by a well-intentioned, albeit ill-informed loved one, a game child. Or perhaps you remember that Christmas when you and every other child prayed, wished, and hoped for the hottest toy of the season. You know what I'm talking about, the classic fun time horse. I don't even know what this is a knockoff of, but the name's misleading. Classic fun time horse. You may recall wanting nothing more than a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. But when the veil, that is, the wrapping, was torn, what you uncovered was not one of the four amphibious crime fighters, but a distant and more bulbous relative, the new-style Ninja Tortoise. Tortoise on the chest. And finally, it may have been that you counted the sleeps to unwrap what you believed would be your favorite storybook character, Winnie the Pooh. But instead of the famed bear of the 100-acre wood, what you were given was something more curious. You got Bear of the Interest. Speaking of interest, let me draw your attention to the small label in the bottom corner that describes this toy as a high-class weapon. I don't remember that being part of the many adventures of that silly old bear. Now, it's unlikely that any of us received any of these Christmas knockoffs, with the exception of the Newsboys CD in my case. So it's easy to grin and laugh and shrug at these silly attempts to satisfy desperate consumers Christmas after Christmas. But I think it's worth considering today, and of course for the next few weeks after this one, some bigger knockoffs that come Christmas after Christmas. And not just holiday gifts, but also attitudes and pursuits and longings. Christmas knockoffs are those exalted sentimentalities and nostalgic demands, those false narratives that we all buy into. The Advent season is one of hope, peace, love, and joy, but not just any knockoff expression of those Advent themes. It's about true, genuine hope, peace, love, and joy, contained in the gift of God's Son, Jesus, given to a very weary world. The life and then the death of Jesus Christ invite us to something far more intense than holiday sentiment and family traditions as our ultimate hope or our ultimate longing fulfilled. It invites us to look to something far more transcendent than an upbeat attitude about the future because, oh my goodness, the new year's coming. It invites us this season to look at the way the world is, to look at the way that the world is going, but also at the promises of Christ that are contained within his life and his work. We know that. We know that that's true. We know that that should be the focus, but yet this is really a minor, brief, if at all, type of reflection of so many Christians, at least confessing Christians at Christmas. Surely a glaring evidence of this is the trend that is the blue Christmas service that many churches offer these days. If you're not familiar with these services, this is a somber service where people that are experiencing grief and hopelessness during the Christmas season can find a place to engage how they're really feeling and find God's grace for them in a season when everyone else seems to be so incredibly happy. Now, there's nothing wrong with this service at all. I don't bring this up to say this is unusual. What's unusual is that we have to, in the church, have special services like this at all. Because shouldn't this be the general message of the church at Christmas time always? If you're a person hurting and hopeless and grieving at Christmas time and you have to find a special place, it may be that the church isn't talking about what it should be talking about at Christmas time. Why is the blue Christmas service for the grieved and broken and hurting and hopeless the exception?
Shouldn't this be at every single church during this season? And I don't think it's because we've just accidentally stumbled into accepting a few knockoffs. I think it's because, if we're being honest, we actually have got to a place where we prefer them. I could probably draw a bigger crowd if I really hammer on all the sticky sentimentality of this season than if we talk about the darkening of our world and that we're actually completely incapable of changing it. The promises of hope, peace, joy, and love available through Jesus Christ are set aside year after year, even in church, for the hodgepodge of let's put family first, let's have feasts, let's get flights and decorations, and humanism because it's Christmas and we should be generous because it's Christmas. If you spend just a moment thinking about this, and I've spent a lot of time this week thinking about this, everything in this season, from the expectation of Santa's coming to the peaceful scenes of homecomings and Christmas Eves painted on Christmas cards that we send to relatives, the mistletoe romance, and the jubilant parties with friends near and far, all of this screams a search for hope and peace and love and joy. It tells us we're looking desperately for the gifts that are contained in Christ's birth, the promises of Advent, but we're settling for them in cheap knockoffs. And maybe the big letdown of Christmas ending that so many of us feel each and every year when you put the tree away and go, well, it's gone again till next year. Maybe that letdown is a sign we have not enjoyed what is genuine, but we've settled for a knockoff instead. So this Advent season, I admit, if you are mostly looking for family first, slow falling snowflakes, holiday rom-coms, and office parties, I'll leave that to you and to Hallmark and to President's Choice and all the fantastic offerings they have this holiday season for your parties. But if you would like a deeper look at Christmas and specifically Advent, that is available. It's available to us. And for those that are interested, we're going to set out then to separate the knockoff from the genuine. Today we begin with hope. So as we do from time to time around here, we're going to look at a video from the Bible Project on hope. Because I suspect that not everyone here even understands what biblical hope is. We understand hope in the sense of like wishing, longing, wanting, expecting. What's biblical hope? What's it rooted in? Why do we talk about it? What is hope? So I'm going to show you about a 4-minute video on that topic.
So let's say you want to describe the feeling of anticipating a future that's better than the present. You might be giddy or excited or maybe unsure, but most of us know that experience. We call it hope. It's a state of anticipation, and it's crucial for healthy human existence. And it's a really important concept in the Bible. In fact, there are many words for hope in the ancient languages of the Bible, and they're all fascinating. In the Old Testament, there are two main Hebrew words translated as hope. The first is yachal, which means simply to wait for. Like in the story of Noah and the ark, as the flood waters recede, Noah had to yachal for weeks. The other Hebrew word is kavah, which also means to wait. It's related to the Hebrew word kav, which means cord. When you pull a kav tight, you produce a state of tension until there's release. That's kavah, the feeling of tension and expectation while you wait for something to happen. The prophet Isaiah depicts God as a farmer who plants vines and kavahs for good grapes. Or the prophet Micah talks about farmers who both kavah and yachal for morning dew to give moisture to the land. So in biblical Hebrew, hope is about waiting or expectation. But waiting for what? In the period of Israel's prophets, as the nation was sinking into self-destruction, Isaiah said, "At this moment, the Lord's hiding his face from Israel, so I will kavah for him." The only hope Isaiah had in those dark days was the hope for God himself. You find this same notion of hope all over the book of Psalms, where these words appear over 40 times. In almost every case, what people are waiting for is God. Like in Psalm 130, the poet cries out from a pit of despair, I kavah for the Lord. Let Israel yachal for the Lord, because he's loyal and will redeem Israel from its sins. Biblical hope is based on a person, which makes it different from optimism. Optimism is about choosing to see in any situation how circumstances could work out for the best. But biblical hope is not focused on circumstances. In fact, hopeful people in the Bible often recognize there's no evidence things will get better, but you choose hope anyway. Like the prophet Hosea, he lived in a dark time when Israel was being oppressed by foreign empires, and he chose hope when he said God could turn this valley of trouble into a door of hope, like the day when Israel came up from the land of Egypt. God had surprised his people with redemption back in the days of the Exodus, and he could do so again. So it's God's past faithfulness that motivates hope for the future. You look forward by looking backward, trusting in nothing other than God's character. It's like the poet of Psalm 39 who says, And now, O Lord, what else can I kavah for? You are my yachal. In the New Testament, the earliest followers of Jesus cultivated this similar habit of hope. They believed that Jesus' life, death, and resurrection was God's surprising response to our slavery to evil and death. The empty tomb opened up a new door of hope, and they used the Greek word elpis to describe this anticipation. The Apostle Peter said that Jesus' resurrection opened up a living hope, that people can be reborn, to become new and different kinds of humans. More than once, the Apostle Paul says the good news about Jesus announces the elpis of glory. In both cases, this elpis is based on a person, the risen Jesus, who has overcome death. And this hope wasn't just for humans. The apostles believed that what happened to Jesus in the resurrection was a foretaste of what God had planned for the whole universe. In Paul's words, it's a hope that creation itself will be liberated from slavery to corruption into freedom when God's children are glorified. So Christian hope is bold, waiting for humanity and the whole universe to be rescued from evil and death. And some would say it's crazy, and maybe it is. But biblical hope isn't optimism based on the odds. It's a choice to wait for God to bring about a future that's as surprising as a crucified man rising from the dead. Christian hope looks back to the risen Jesus in order to look forward. And so we wait. That's what the biblical words for hope are all about.
So here's the concluding summary from that video. Christian hope is bold, waiting for humanity and the whole universe to be rescued from evil and death. And some would say it's crazy, and maybe it is. But biblical hope isn't optimism based on the odds. It's a choice to wait for God to bring about a future that's as surprising as a crucified man rising from the dead. Christian hope looks back to the risen Jesus in order to look forward. And so we wait. And that's what the biblical words for hope are all about. Dan, you want to just bring these lights up for me a little bit? That's all right. So biblical hope is a choice to wait for God. What is hope? It's a choice to wait for God. Biblical hope is also an acceptance that there is nothing that humankind can create in its own strength, in its own creativity, in its own wisdom to bring healing to the condition of the world. One of my favorite voices on Advent is Fleming Rutledge. If you've been at this church for a while, you've heard me quote her every Christmas for probably at least the last 3 or 4 years. She offers this correction to the person settling for a cheap knockoff type hope that floats around out there. She says, the hope that we meet coming towards us in Advent then is the hope that lies beyond any possible good news that could arise out of the human situation. Let's read that again. The hope that we meet coming towards us in Advent then is the hope that lies beyond any possible good news that could arise out of the human situation. It must come to us from the future of God, or not at all. So as we dig a little deeper with biblical hope clear in our minds, this idea of waiting for God, I think a practical question to ask ourselves is, how is my hope? How's my hope? And then furthermore, is my hope biblical? Have I been settling for a knockoff? Has the hope I've been counting on and letting influence me and try to pick me up day in and day out, is this something more like a good attitude and something that is entirely dependent on right circumstances? Now, maybe you don't know how to answer that question today, and that would be fine. It's a pretty deep question. So let me ask you another question to help you begin to process that, even in this moment. How's your soul? That being your inner life. Is it steady? Or does it feel like it's constantly in turmoil and at the mercy of every unexpected wave of life? Is your week in and week out just a roller coaster of chaos? And therefore your countenance, your disposition to the world and to others is sort of agitated and unpredictable and always tired. And I ask this question because one of the works of hope, one of its ministries to us, we could say, in the life of followers of Jesus is that it is an anchoring for our soul. It is an anchoring of our inner life. So to borrow from an old sailing term, we can say this, that biblical hope holds us fast. Hebrews 6, about halfway through 18 and 19, it says, "We who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged." We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. We who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. One of the sure signs that we have allowed a knockoff to be our soul anchor, to be the anchor of our inner life, is how easily we drift into chaos and disorientation about our life. If our hope rope, so to speak, snaps, and then we just quickly drift from one anchor to another, bouncing off every obstacle along the way, we have likely placed our hope in a knockoff. We were likely hoping in something to make it better than waiting for God. We were likely counting on circumstance rather than on God. In the context of Christmas, it's not uncommon for people to hope so much for the circumstances of Christmas to go well that they become deeply distressed for days, if not weeks or months, when the perfect Christmas doesn't seem possible or it falls apart at the last moment. Everything's ruined. Or the person who's depressed for days, as I've already mentioned, when Christmas ends, because the hope of that season's coming is now gone, and now what do I have to anticipate? There's no anchor. We often tether ourselves to things going right, or to people doing what we expect, or our kids becoming the best versions of themselves, or my life will just fall apart, or our job going the way that we expect it to go, or our dream house finally satisfying our soul, or our finances finally being enough that now we're protected from any storm because we make good decisions, or our extended family living up to the standard of the good family life. And only when that is the way it should be do I feel at peace. And we have all found pretty quickly that none of these anchors hold us very firm for very long. We end up miserable in a variety of ways because that is what we have expected, and it let us down. We're stressed, we're angry, we're hard on our spouse, we're hard on our coworkers, we're rude and we're demanding, and then we're disappointed with God. You see, church, hoping in general is not biblical. Hoping in general is not biblical. You can hope and have nothing to do with an expectation of the future. You can just hope generally because it's just a nice way to go through life, hopeful. We can desire to be healthy. We can desire career advancement. We can desire to have family home for the holidays. But that's not necessarily biblical hope. That's just sort of a longing for the human heart. And when that becomes hope, then we're doomed to drift. Because expecting anything other than God coming to make the world right isn't heavy enough to hold us in place. This is why the author of Hebrews says, and I love this little line in here, he says, we have this hope. Not hope. This hope, specifically. And he says that by this hope, those who have taken hold of it can be greatly encouraged. Being optimistic won't hold you secure. Controlling and fighting for ideal circumstances won't hold you steady. It will leave you tossed and battered by life. Only this hope, that is, this expectation for a God that has come and is coming again to make the world right, only that can hold us firm and secure through even the worst of circumstances. And I think that this is worth saying for many of us. You know, this idea of Christian hope isn't about lowering our expectations. Oh, life's hard, but I'll just keep hoping. This is actually about increasing our expectation. This is actually about building our expectation greater, higher, stronger. You see, most of our expectations, what we would believe to be so important to our happiness, are actually really low on the expectation scale because they're so rooted in self and in preference and in ability and in our own demands. But the Christian hope is about looking higher. It's about looking further. It's about looking deeper. It's about believing that the Jesus who has come and is coming again to make the world right is our hope. Now, this can feel a little bit challenging because this type of hope isn't instant. There's no instant gratification with the Christian hope. And we're not always very good at being patient. And this challenge is really what I want to address with the last bit of time here this morning. Because in 2022, I think the church needs this reminder: to hope is to wait. Paul writes in Romans chapter 8, beginning in verse 22. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. Paul's words to the Romans can be difficult to understand. This may be one of the most challenging, if not the most challenging book in the New Testament. This passage is no exception. Romans 8, every single word in that little passage is loaded. There's a lot going on here. So what I want to do is show you Eugene Peterson's Message translation to really pop this passage for you, because the wording is so rich. When we get into our modern language, I think it just gives us another angle to understand this from. And remember, as we read this, when we see the word waiting, we're talking about hope. So Peterson translates this as, all around us we observe a pregnant creation. The difficult times of pain throughout the world are simply birth pangs.
But it's not only around us, it's within us. The Spirit of God is arousing us within. We are also feeling the birth pangs. These sterile and barren bodies of ours are yearning for full deliverance. This is why waiting does not diminish us any more than waiting diminishes a pregnant mother. We are enlarged in the waiting. We, of course, don't see what is enlarging us, but the longer we wait, the larger we become, and the more joyful our expectancy. I really appreciate Peterson's translation of this passage because of the beauty and the weight that hangs in these verses. He takes Paul's rich words and then he just expresses them in another way that shows us that waiting, that is hoping, is actually a good thing. I love that he says we are not diminished while we wait. Talk about a truth we need to hear in 2022. We are not diminished while we wait. And he says our expectancy actually increases while we wait. Now, you know as well as I do, we live at a time when speed and instant gratification is arguably one of the highest values of our society. I'm regularly asked by people, I'm sure you are too, how long is this going to take? You know, your kids want to show you something. Yeah, how long is this going to take? You've got a meeting with somebody. How long is this going to take? Because I have something also. I'm guilty of it too. How long is this going to take? Because in our opinion, slow is bad. And if we're going to have to wait too long here, then we're going to need to make another arrangement for how this is going to go, because we can't make this take forever. But if it's quick and instant in our minds, then this is very good. And then I can commit to that. Time is money. It's precious. Don't waste my time. We are despicably addicted to instant. Despicably addicted to instant. From our oatmeal to our coffee, to our meetings, to our friendships, to our marriage, to our sexuality, to everything in between. And this addiction to instant is so unlike God our Father, who seems to know almost nothing of being in a hurry. And because of our addiction to speed and the instant, the biblical hope that is considered at Advent is often ignored or worse, misunderstood. Or, and maybe worse, if hope is celebrated, it's celebrated as something that's already fulfilled. This is a very interesting thing at Advent. We talk about Christ coming as the fulfillment of hope. And so hope isn't even a present thing anymore. It's the thing that was. Oh, remember when the world was hoping and then Jesus came and now we don't hope anymore. No, we're still hoping. Now, of course, part of this is true. They were waiting. The weary world was longing for an answer, and Jesus came, and they realized God had a plan, and He'd not forgotten them, and He sent His Son. And yes, our sin was atoned for, and Jesus rose again. Yes, hope fulfilled. But when Jesus was raised from the grave and ascended to the Father, and the Jews realized Rome was still in control, and generation has still faced the pain of a broken, evil, fallen world, we realize that we still need to hope. Jesus' resurrection opened up a new hope. It fulfilled one, but it opened a new one. And so when we come to Christmas, it's not okay to just be like, yeah, hope was satisfied. Hope was born again through Christmas and the life and death of Jesus. So then, contrary to the spirit of Christmas that is instant and in a hurry, hope is not so quickly satisfied. Hope means that we have to wait for a long time. Unlike these chocolate advent calendars that tell us exactly how long we must wait, biblical hope doesn't know how long it waits. It just keeps waiting. It just keeps patiently expecting, patiently anticipating. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German martyr, in the hands of the Nazis, wrote this in a letter. He said, "Celebrating Advent means being able to wait." So as you go through your Christmas season, maybe you need to put that on your fridge or in your phone or something. Celebrating Advent means being able to wait. Waiting is an art that our impatient age has forgotten. It wants to break open the ripe fruit when it has hardly finished planting the shoot. Now, here's what's so amazing about biblical hope. I love this. This has, for me, been the most encouraging part of my preparation, is chewing on this, what I'm about to share with you now. Waiting indefinitely for anything else would be incredibly difficult, if not impossible. We would not do well waiting indefinitely. Eventually we have to know. Eventually we need an answer. Eventually we need to know how long this is going to take. If we waited indefinitely for years and years and years, if not generations, it would probably have a negative effect on us. People would probably think we're crazy. We would probably counsel others and ourselves, eventually maybe you shouldn't be waiting for that anymore. But biblical hope, this waiting, this expectation, this anticipation for God to do his work amongst us, this waiting doesn't take away from us. It doesn't erode us. It doesn't wear us down the way that waiting for basically anything else would. This waiting for Jesus, this expecting, anticipating, it's not like standing in line at the Independent when the power goes out and you lose a little bit of your sanity as you wait for the lights to come on with your cart. This hope works in us. This waiting produces a joyful excitement. This waiting produces an anticipation in us that Paul likens to a mother waiting to meet her baby. Like a mother who can't see her child, we can't see the hope that is in us and enlarging us with expectation. We can't see it. But the longer we wait, the more joyful we become. And this may be why, and if you've known anyone like this, you know this is true. The older the saint, the closer people get who've walked with Jesus for a long time to their deathbed, seemingly become more joyful to meet Jesus face to face. There is an expectation, a joy, an anticipation that enlarges and grows within us, that is not there at the beginning the way it is at the end. The biblical hope has an effect on us. And it seems that this effect is what is going to make that final realization so incredible. That God is building within his people a holy anticipation to see it finally come to pass that we can't even quite understand, but it is increasing by work of the Spirit within us that is causing us to groan for our full redemption. Bonhoeffer goes on to say that whoever does not know the austere blessedness of waiting, wow, that is of hopefully doing without, will never experience the full blessing of fulfillment. Whoever does not know the austere blessedness of waiting, that is of hopefully doing without, will never experience the full blessing of fulfillment. What a great way to celebrate Advent, that this is a group of people that is hopefully doing without. For now. We have to know the waiting to know the full blessing, the promise coming to pass. So, Church of Christ, my friends, the hope considered, the hope we have, the hope we can take hold of, is so much different than these cheap knockoffs that this season and every other season of life portray it to be. I remember Barack Obama released a book many years ago now called The Audacity of Hope.
And I love the title. I've always loved the title. I cannot preach on hope in that book not come to my mind. It happens every time. The audacity of hope. But knowing Obama, I suspect the book is not on the topic of biblical hope, but on human optimism. And I just don't think that human optimism is that audacious. I actually think human optimism is frail and fickle. But biblical hope, that's pretty audacious. Because it's bold and it's brave and it's confident and it appears to be risky. It's wild, it's sort of crazy. Biblical hope doesn't face what is hard and ugly and scary and wrong and believe and wish for something better or look for the silver lining that's just going to erase all this darkness because I'm just looking on the bright side here. Instead, biblical hope just stands defiantly in the darkest place and says there is hope, and hope grows in places like this, but not because of me or anyone like me, because of God. And so I'm going to stand here audaciously waiting. Fleming Rutledge also says, Advent always begins in the dark. This is maybe my favorite Christmas sentence on the planet. Advent always begins in the dark. But there is a but. And we find it revealed in the story that the Scriptures tell. It's dark, but. And so today, if you are low on hope, I would invite you to consider your life, consider your past, consider your today, consider your future. What are you hoping for? What is your hope rooted in? Are you counting on a knockoff? Are you just waiting for the circumstance to just turn a little bit and then it'll be better? Are you counting on your optimism to get you through the rest of the days that you'll walk here on earth? Are you hoping in the goodness of your family, like finally your family is going to be the thing that's going to satisfy the longings and expectations in your life? Is it your career? If you finally can get noticed or finally make that number or whatever it might be, then you'll be satisfied and you'll be okay. Is it the right people sitting around your table on December 25th? And if that doesn't happen, then oh my goodness, Christmas is ruined. Or is your hope the same as the prophet Isaiah who said, I will wait for God? He's hidden his face, Isaiah said, but I will wait for God. No one else was, but Isaiah said, I'll do it. I'm going to stand in the midst of this darkness. I will wait. I will hope for God. Is it like Peter who said, I have a living hope? It's alive. Is it like the writer of Hebrews who said, I'm anchored and I'm held firm and I'm held secure and this isn't going to go anywhere? Is it like Paul who said, I have a hope of glory? He also said, we are saved in this hope. This is the hope of Advent. This is the hope of the church as she stands between the frontiers. The bride that has seen the darkness of the world that was, but also sees a faint light in the distance of the world that will be, and she stands in the middle, waiting, hoping, confident, not diminished, but noticing the expectation is increasing. And so on the first Sunday of Advent, we say, come, Lord Jesus. We are waiting patiently for you. As we come to this table, I think that the best use of our time is to have a conversation with Jesus about what you've been hoping in. It's probably a wonderful time to confess what you've been hoping in. He knows already, but it might be helpful to you to say, God, I have noticed that I am expecting this. I am counting on this. And I'm miserable because of it.
And then amazingly, in this Advent season, as you come to this table, might it be appropriate to ask Jesus by way of the Holy Spirit to fill you with that effective living hope again. Paul says because of the Spirit within us, the anticipation, the groaning comes out. So this isn't just I'm going to hope harder. This is the Spirit going to work and creating the expectation. What an amazing thing to be a group of people that sit here more hopeful than we were when we came in, because we asked for it. And here's what's so incredible about this hope of glory. And I'm doubling down on this. This hope doesn't diminish us. I think that there's this martyr complex, like we're just waiting for glory and we're so pathetic and exhausted and weary in it. I really don't think Paul and Peter were walking around completely defeated because of the living hope and the hope of glory. There is something beautiful that can take place in the person that really has this impartation of God's hope into their heart. And in addition to that, I think that when we do this, we actually worship God at the same time, that we adore him and we bless his name as we say, oh God, we hope only in you. When he sees his church ask and surrender ourselves in a posture of waiting and longing and expecting him. I think it'd be silly to come to church today and talk about this living, active hope of glory that doesn't diminish us, but then just only talk about it and not ask for it to increase as we walk through Advent season. And remember, church, this is always important for us evangelical churches who think that we'll just try harder. The promise of Advent isn't that you should hope now. The promise of Advent is that you have something to hope in. You have hope. It's not tisk tisk, it's oh my God, you've given me hope.